The proximal convoluted tubule drains the filtrate from that capsular space of the renal corpuscle. And this filtrate, stupidly, is rich in everything that we don't want leaving the body by way of urine. The simple cuboidal cells of the proximal convoluted tubule, they have many surface area expanding villi on them. And this is so that they can resorb any ions like sodium, calcium, potassium, energy molecules such as glucose or fatty acids. And so they can reabsorb pretty much all of the stuff that the renal corpuscle said, this is too small, I want to get rid of it. Remember that glomerular filtration only separates things by size, not whether or not you need it. So albumin, which is represented by my eggs here, those are the dividing line in glomerular filtration, right? If something is larger than albumin, then it's going to be kept in the red, in the capillary. If it's smaller than albumin, then we're going to give it away. So this kind of reminds me of my parents. My father is a pack rat, like borderline hoarder. And after my mom passed, I realized that she was the force that kept my father from tipping that balance to becoming a hoarder. But during my childhood, my mom would always be cleaning stuff out and making piles to go to like Salvation Army. And my father would be going through the piles and being like, oh, how can you throw this away? This is awesome. I want to keep this. And I feel like that's what the proximal convoluted tubule is always doing. It's saying to the glomerulus, how come you threw away all of this sodium? I need this. I want to keep this. How can you throw away all of this calcium? I need this. I want to keep this. And most importantly, how could you throw away all of these energy molecules? I don't know when the next famine's going to occur. I want to keep those things. So the PCT, it doesn't do very much secretion. It's all about reabsorption, moving stuff from the filtrate to the capillary. The only thing the PCT might secrete, and this is only when it absolutely has to, is hydrogen cations, right? Because those hydrogen cations might be making the blood acidic, and therefore putting them into the filtrate would make this filtrate here more acidic, but it would mean that your blood up here is getting less acidic. And we know that there are many mechanisms during the day that make your blood less acidic. As filtrate descends into this descending loop of the nephron, the cells transition from simple cuboidal for the thick segment, and they become simple squamous for this thin segment right here. These cells, either the cuboidal or squamous, do not have any villi, and the descending loops dip into the medulla of the kidney. The descending nephron loop reabsorbs only as much water as it possibly can. That's the only thing that it is tasked with moving from the filtrate into the blood is water. Juxtamedullary nephrons, they dip deep into those medullary pyramids where it gets saltier and saltier. And that salt of the kidney sucks more and more water out of the nephron as those juxtamedullary loops dip into the pyramids. Because their loops are extended over a distance and they can reabsorb more water than those cortical nephrons, juxtamedullary nephrons are more active when you're dehydrated. As the filtrate continues to the bottom of the loop, it becomes more and more concentrated with solutes, right? Because it's losing water. The colloid osmotic pressure of the filtrate is increasing. Similar to the descending loop, the ascending loop has a thin segment made of simple squamous cells and then a thick segment made of simple cuboidal cells. When the filtrate enters the ascending loop, it's really concentrated with solutes, right? Because it's just been subjected to water being sucked out of it by that descending loop. So the ascending loop is tasked with reclaiming any sodium, which is intensely important for our blood colloid osmotic pressure. Sodium and potassium cations and chloride anions are all reabsorbed by this ascending loop. There are active transporters embedded in the cells of the loop, and these transporters are usually able to move one sodium cation, one potassium cation, and two chloride anions at once. But the problem is, you don't really want that potassium. It just happens to be that I have to reabsorb it if I want to get those other things. So the NAK pump secretes potassium back into the filtrate, right? We have NAK pumps that are able of excusing potassium back and at the same time reclaiming any sodium that those other transporters could not get. Now, since our solutes are being reabsorbed, we would expect that water is following them, right? Because water follows salt, but it doesn't here. In fact, all of these ions are being moved from the filtrate to the capillary, but water does not flow with them because the cells of the ascending loop do not have the ability to transport water. They don't have those aquaporins, which were the transporters for water. They don't have any channels, nothing that water could use, even if it wanted to. The ascending loop is impermeable. And so as filtrate flows along in the ascending loop, these solutes get sucked out of it and the filtrate becomes more dilute, going back to the stage that it was kind of in when it entered the descending loop to begin with. In the distal convoluted tubule, we have simple cuboidal cells with some villi, not a lot of villi, not as much as in the proximal convoluted tubule. But again, this surface expanding feature allows the distal convoluted tubule to move lots of substances in either direction. I know we still have the collecting duct to do, but the distal convoluted tubule, it really is the last chance for your kidney to adjust anything other than water and pH. So sodium, potassium, chloride anions, all of those things have to be dealt with here. So if there's glucose in the filtrate, here's your last chance to take it back. If there's too much potassium in the blood, here's your last chance to get rid of it. Are you dehydrated? Well, then this is your last chance to take back water. And what about pH? We can reabsorb or secrete hydrogen cations as needed. We can also do the same for bicarbonate. So the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, they both have receptors that allow them to respond to ADH and aldosterone. I'm sorry, I should make those over the cuboidal there. If the distal convoluted tubule receives ADH, it will insert aquaporins into the simple cuboidal cells, and it's going to start reabsorbing water as the hormone told it to do. This will create very concentrated urine. If the DCT receives a signal of aldosterone, which it often does when it receives the signal of ADH, those are often paired, it then inserts little NAK pumps to resorb all of the sodium that it can, but at the same time excuse all of the potassium that it could. And this also makes your urine less dilute. These hormones are talked about in much more detail in the mini lecture on water resorption. This also is the last point that you could secrete nitrogenous wastes in the form of urea, but there are other nitrogenous wastes that you would also get rid of or deal with here. And as said, if there's any bicarb existing in the filtrate and you need to moderate your pH, this is the point where you can choose to resorb that bicarb. The collecting duct has a really high diameter, much more than the other parts of the tubule, because it's collecting filtrate from many nephrons, not just one, right? That's what all of these branches are here. They're indicating other nephrons that are connecting to that. The collecting duct has two populations of cells. And some of these cells are also present in the distal convoluted tubule. There are principal cells, and these are the cells that are able to respond to ADH or aldosterone. So these are the cells that are capable of moderating your water loss or reabsorption. There are also intercalated cells, which are involved more in pH balance. Here in the collecting duct, this is our absolute last chance to deal with hydrogen cations and bicarbonate ions. These intercalated cells, they secrete hydrogen cations, making you less acidic and making your urine more acidic. If your urine is acidic, then these cells are working to prevent you from being acidic. Here's the problem. These intercalated cells will only secrete a hydrogen cation if it's traded or resorbed for a potassium cation. So I can only secrete hydrogen if I'm willing to take back potassium. And I'm not usually, right? Remember, we always want to be secreting potassium. I just feel like the collecting duct can undo all of the good work that the distal convoluted tubule has done on reabsorbing sodium and potassium. But all collecting ducts, they all descend into that renal pyramid and they converge upon the renal papilla where they weep urine into a minor calyx that's collected into a major calyx and then is collected into the renal basin.